Shalom, 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 everyone. Welcome to the Way Midrash, virtual Midrash, Way Wednesdays, right? Welcome. So glad that you're here. Boy, we're going through the book of Numbers, and it's fun stuff, I'll tell you. And tell you what, if you guys want to support this, you can go to thewaycongregation.com. You can give there. You can give through the app, or if you want to, you can give through my Patreon page, patreon.com/Doug Hamp. Any amount is great. Thank you. Really do appreciate it. So let's jump into the text. I'm excited about getting into it. And if you have questions or comments, I will do my best to get to them afterward. Okay. So let's get started. And here we are in Numbers. We're going to start in chapter 5. There's a little bit of chapter 4 left, but we mostly did that last week. So I want to just really concentrate on chapters 5 and 6 because there's exciting stuff here. All right, here we go. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Command the children of Israel that they put out of the camp every leper, everyone who has a discharge, and whoever becomes defiled by a corpse. You shall put out both male and female. You shall put them outside the camp, that they may not defile their camps in the midst of which I dwell." And the children of Israel did so and put them outside the camp, as the Lord spoke to Moses, so the children of Israel did. All right, let me stop right there. Now, as this book goes on, we're going to come to a time where Miriam is going to start talking trash about Moses. And basically what she's doing is she's talking to Aaron, who then communicates it to Moses. And God says in chapter 12, "Hey, Moses or Aaron and Miriam, come here, come into my office." What are you doing talking trash about Moses, right? Is he not a faithful servant in all my house, right? With other prophets, I speak, in dreams and visions, but with Moses, I speak pe el pe. I speak mouth to mouth or face to face, as it were, right? Moses is really a special guy. So what happens to Miriam, because she is slandering this man of God, she becomes leprous and she is put outside the camp just like everybody else. Now, thankfully, her leprosy goes away in 7 days, right? But this is the scenario. Now, it's interesting that as we go on throughout the Israelite history, we find that there were no other Israelites that were healed of their leprosy, aside from Miriam, and I guess if you want to count Moses, his hand turning leprous. So, okay. But otherwise, there's no other healings recorded in the Bible, it's none that I'm aware of, where an Israelite is healed of their leprosy until, of course, the time of Yeshua. Now, the one guy that is healed is Naaman, right? He's the Syrian. And what does he do? He humbles himself and he does eventually what Elisha tells him to do. He's so offended, right? you know, it's like, wait, you're not even gonna come out and talk to me, and you want me to go dip in this little nasty little river? I got great rivers back home. But he does it, right? And he's healed of his leprosy. And Jesus gets to the point. He says there was nobody healed in those days except for Naaman, right? So there's no other Israelite that was healed. So why were there lepers at this point when God is in their midst? Well, we're not told specifically, but leprosy seems to be, again, it seems to be one of those diseases that is some way related to slander. Okay, we see it very clearly with Miriam that she was slandering Moses. And you could even make the case that Moses was slandering God when he's like, "Hey, I want you to go to Egypt." And Moses says, "I'm not the right guy." And he says, "Okay, put your hand in inside your robe," and takes it out, and it's leprous. So you can make the case that he was being slanderous at that point. So I wouldn't say it's 100%, but I think it's at least an 80% case that that leprosy and slander are in some way related. Okay, and in fact, when we come to the book of Revelation, where you have all the people that have taken the mark of the beast, and guess what else they were doing? They were blaspheming God and those who dwell in heaven, right? And what do they come down with? Well, these really nasty skin diseases that are maybe not leprosy, quote unquote, but they're very much akin to a wasting disease where your skin is just wasting away. That's what leprosy really is. So again, there seems to be this correlation between the two. So the people that are outside the camp, again, we can only speculate because we're not told specifically, but when you have God in your midst, and when you've got Moses there, and you know that God's been doing some pretty incredible stuff, you'd think, why are there leprous people here? Did not God say that none of the diseases of Egypt would come upon them if they did what he said to do, right? Remember, we read that in Leviticus chapter 26, right? We read that very clearly, that if they do what God says to do, then none of those diseases will come upon them. But if they don't, well, get ready. So there can only be one conclusion, is that those people were not doing what God said to do, and sadly, they were facing the consequences. Now, on the other side, of the flip side, it would suggest that had they done what God said to do, or perhaps even repented and come back to God in humility and faith, then maybe, quite likely, they would not have had those issues. Okay. Now, again, I understand by the time we get to Yeshua, it could be a different scenario. It could be generation upon generation. And maybe not everybody who was leprous was there because of slander. So it's a hard case to make. But again, there does seem to be a correlation. And well, the bottom line is we want to do what God says to do, and we really want to watch our tongues. I'll tell you, in today's age of social media, it's so easy to be a keyboard warrior where you can get all high and mighty and you can say big, bold things behind that keyboard because nobody sees you. And if you have maybe a pen name or a fake name, whatever you're using, for your social media, right? They'll never know, right? You could be 1, 2, 3, 4. That could be your name, and you have some silly picture, and they don't know who you are. You're in Mr. Anonymous, Mrs. Anonymous, and you can say terrible things. And I've run into a lot of people who are sort of these warriors for Christ. They imagine themselves to be that they're going to be on Facebook and they're going to correct everybody that needs correcting, because a lot of people need correcting, right? And there's a heretic in every corner, right? And so it's their job to go and to fix all these issues. Have I ever done that? Well, I hope I haven't done too much of it, all right? But I've probably done a little bit here and there, all right? If I'm honest, right? So, but I had to repent of that. I'm like, you know what? I'm not getting anywhere. Maybe this isn't a good strategy. Okay, so I had to stop that. And I really encourage us to be very careful about how we're treating other people. I want to take you to one of my my favorite and least favorite passages at the same time. Why is it my least favorite? Well, because it really hits hard. Okay, this is Proverbs 6:16. These 6 things the Lord hates. Yes, 7 are an abomination to him: a proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift in running to evil, a false witness who speaks lies, and one who sows discord among brethren. Wow. What are these things? They're called abominations, right? So God looks at these things as abominations. Now, it's the same word. Toiva is the same word as homosexuality is abomination, right? So doesn't make homosexuality better, but understand this, that these 7 things are just as ugly in God's eyes as the abomination of homosexuality, right? So we might say, well, I'm not a homosexual. That's so terrible. Yeah, I agree. But look what he says here, right? These 7 things are an abomination, a proud look. That's just arrogance, pride, right? A lying tongue. You may say, well, I don't lie. Well, hopefully. Hands that shed innocent blood. Probably none of us have shed innocent blood. I hope not. A heart that devises wicked plans. Again, I hope we're not doing that. Feet that are swift and running to evil. Well, maybe we have fingers that are swift. Maybe not feet so much nowadays. chances are, most of us have not used our feet to run to evil, I hope. But then this is where gets a little closer to home. A witness, a false witness who speaks lies. How many times have we passed a meme, we've forwarded it to somebody else as if it's absolute truth, and only later, much later, sometimes we discover, oh, oops, that wasn't so true. And sometimes these memes can be very detrimental to somebody. They're slandering somebody. And we just didn't have all the facts, but we thought we did. Okay. And then the last one who sows discord among brethren, right? Again, Facebook is just a crazy place for sowing discord. And I've pretty much, for the most part, I've given up having any kind of what I would call meaningful conversation on Facebook, because it so quickly turns into just mudslinging, right? So this is something that's really dear to my heart. I hope it'll be dear to your heart, because I believe that this is something that we need to address as the body. Again, it's easy for us to get in our little huddle, we get in our corner and say, well, we've got it all figured out. We're keeping the Sabbath, we're not eating pig anymore, and give ourselves a pat on the back. But I don't think God would really be giving us a pat on the back. I think he'd say, you know what? Okay, so you're doing these things. Great. But what about this other stuff? What about these abominations in my sight where you're sowing discord among the brethren? Are we doing that? And then we become rather haughty, right? When we start saying, well, I'm keeping the Sabbath, and I'm messianic, and I keep the feast, and I don't eat pork like some of those other people. What is that? Isn't that just a proud look? I mean, that's what it is, right? So this is why we have to stay humble, right? If we keep the Sabbath, we keep the feast, we don't eat pork, but we're prideful, we haven't accomplished anything, right? In fact, they're going in the wrong direction. So again, of course, I would encourage you to keep the Sabbath. I would encourage you to keep the feast. That's great. But only if you're going to also be humble about it. Then it actually has significance. If you're not humble, then who knows, right? You're missing it. And I'm convinced that so many of our ills would be solved if we would just really follow God's word. I think so many things of guilt. Guilt is a huge factor for our health. And because we're doing things, we may not feel guilty necessarily, but we know there's something wrong because of the way that we've been acting. And that can express itself very much through our health. So just some things to keep in mind. I don't claim to have arrived by any means, but we want to be careful. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel, when a man or woman commits any sin that men commit in unfaithfulness against the Lord, and that person is guilty, then he shall confess the sin which he has committed. He shall make restitution for his trespass in full, plus 1/5 of it, and give it to the one he has wronged. All right. So wow, that's pretty heavy, right? So you'd give a 20% penalty. If you've wronged somebody, then you got to tack on 20%, 100% plus 20%, right? So 120% is what you need to do to pay back whatever you've done. I think a lot of times as Christians, we wanted to say, well, I'm sorry. And we kind of expect the other person to eat the cost. And I know that in our customer is always right mentality in this kind of society, right? The customer can do no wrong kind of thing. Sometimes we, the customer, use that to take advantage of businesses. It's a gigantic corporation. Maybe it is, but sometimes it's a mom and pop operation. Okay. And, even if it is a major corporation, if they do wrong, that's on them. But if I do wrong, it's on me, right? So I want to make sure that I do the right thing. What they decide to do in their business practices is between God and them, okay? And I don't have to shop there by any means, right? But if I am going to shop there, then I need to act justly, right? This takes us back to Micah 6:8, right? He's shown you, oh man, what is good and what the Lord requires of you. Do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God. I mean, that sums it up, right? If we can do those three things, we've got it. But sadly, right, we often don't. Okay, so here's the next part. But if the man has no relative to whom restitution may be made for the restitution for the wrong must go to the Lord for the priest, in addition to the ram of the atonement with which atonement is made for him. Every offering of all the holy things of the children of Israel, which they bring to the priest, shall be his. And every man's holy things shall be his. Whatever any man gives the priest shall be his. All right. So if the man has no relative to whom restitution may be made for the wrong, all right. So you've done something wrong. Who do I pay for this? Well, there's nobody to pay back. You can give it to the Lord. Okay. If there's no one that you can make restitution for. Making restitution, I think, is a very important thing. And Jesus even talked about how if you have wronged your brother, leave your gift at the altar and go reconcile with your brother. And again, a lot of times we start in the Christian sense of it, we think, well, I just need to go to my brother and say, hey, I'm sorry. Will you forgive me? And we just expect him to say, yeah, sure, it's fine. But sometimes restitution is necessary, right? In other words, I need to pay for the wrong that I've done. Okay. And sometimes we do wrongs knowingly, sometimes we do them unknowingly, but still restitution needs to be made. And if you'll practice that, I'm telling you, God will bless you. He will give you what you need if you will take responsibility. This is all about taking responsibility, right? Think about it. Slander is where you say, it's not my fault, right? It's not my fault that such and such happened. It's so-and-so's fault, right? And it's because blankety blank, fill in the blanks, right? And you start twisting the story and you start painting that person in a bad light instead of taking responsibility for what I've done, right? So you notice that slander and restitution are both in the same thing. Now, again, I'm saying slander, but what I'm talking about is leprosy, right? So assuming that leprosy is because of slander, which I think we can make a good case for it, then there needs to be restitution. Sometimes we've offended people with our words. Sometimes we've offended them with our checkbook or whatever it may be, but we need to make that right. All right. And, sometimes we offend people with, we offend their character. We slander their character. That is a very serious offense. How much is your good name worth? Well, apparently more than gold. And I think all of us would agree with that, right? If my good name suddenly gets tarnished, well, that can lead to all kinds of problems, right? That can be a lack of trust, so people won't do business with me. Or in my case, as a pastor, right, if my name is tarnished, then, well, I can't trust him. And right, that's going to affect me. That's going to affect my bottom line. No doubt about it. Whatever your business is, a bad reputation is going to really hurt you, right? Just think of it like this. Who are you going to trust? You're going to go to the restaurant that has all 5 stars or 1 stars? I think you'll probably go to the one with 5 stars, right? Because if the guy has all 1 stars, then that's pretty bad. And that's basically what slander is. It's saying, no, this guy only gets a 1 star. But in reality, you're twisting it for your own benefit. He's really a 5-star restaurant, but you're saying he's only worth 1 star. Why? Because I want people to come to my restaurant, right? And that's something that shouldn't be done. And again, this happens all the time in our interpersonal relationships, which we've just got to be very careful. So this is where we need to take it out of sort of that ancient context and put it into the real world. Put some feet on this thing and see how it walks, right? Because it's very, very important. All right. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, if any man's wife goes astray and behaves unfaithfully toward him, and a man lies with her carnally, and it is hidden from the eyes of her husband, and it is concealed that she has defiled herself, and there was no witness against her, nor was she caught, if the spirit of jealousy comes upon him, he becomes jealous of his wife, who has defiled herself, or if the spirit of jealousy comes upon him, and he becomes jealous of his wife, although she has not defiled herself, then the man shall bring his wife to the priest. He shall bring the offering required for her, 1/10 of an ephah of barley meal. He shall pour no oil on it and put no frankincense on it, because It is a grain offering of jealousy, an offering for remembering, for bringing iniquity to remembrance. And the priest shall bring her near and set her before the Lord. The priest shall take holy water in an earthen vessel and take some of the dust that is on the floor of the tabernacle and put it into the water. Then the priest shall stand the woman before the Lord, uncover the woman's head, and put the offering for remembering in her hands, which is the grain offering of jealousy. And the priest shall have in his hand the bitter water that brings a curse. And the priest shall put her under oath and say to the woman, if no man has lain with you, and if you have not gone astray to uncleanness while under your husband's authority, be free from this bitter water that brings a curse. But if you have gone astray while under your husband's authority, and if you have defiled yourself, and some other man other than your husband has lain with you, then the priest shall put the woman under the oath of the curse, and he shall say to the woman, the Lord make you a curse and an oath among your people when the Lord makes your thigh rot and your belly swell. And may this water that causes the curse go into your stomach and make your belly swell and your thigh rot. Then the woman shall say, Amen, so be it. Okay, now this is where people want to say, you see that Old Testament stuff. It's so antiquated. I can't believe that God would make people do this, right? And it's such a terrible thing because, here, again, this is the oppression of women or something like that, or you can make up anything you want to do. But let's back up just for a little bit. All right. So now it is possible that maybe she's cheating, right? That's certainly one option, right? And so if that is indeed the case, that her husband kind of gets that sense, right? Now, how do we do that sleuthing nowadays? Well, we might hire a private investigator. We might, kind of get the person's phone and say, haha, I found all of those texts you've been sending to that person, right? All those different things that you can do to kind of find out if so-and-so has been cheating. Now, if that is indeed the case, how does the spouse feel about that? What starts to happen? Bitterness, right? A lot of bitterness. And then sadly, that ends up in court and it gets really ugly and it's not good for anybody. Okay. Now, so that's one scenario. Now, the other one is that maybe this husband is wrong, right? He has this sense, but he's totally mistaken about it. So then what's supposed to happen? Well, in that case, he has this option to take his wife to the priest, right? And he's just going to take some dust from the floor. This isn't going to kill you, right? And some holy water, right? These are not at all dangerous ingredients, right? And so now this is going to be taken, and if nothing has happened, then it's going to do nothing, and the husband is going to look like a fool. Okay, so what this does is it gives a remedy for that jealous husband who just kind of feels like something's been going on. I want to get to the bottom of this, and so if she takes this and nothing happens to her, right, her thigh doesn't rot, and her stomach doesn't swell, then nothing happened, right? And then he needs to put this thing to bed. He can say, okay, clearly you haven't done anything. I was wrong. I'm sorry. I don't know why I didn't trust you. My bad. Mea culpa. Okay, right? And so this puts this thing to rest. It cannot be a festering wound, right? Because what happens to festering wounds? Well, they get all yucky and pussy, and then even nastier, and something breaks down. Okay. And so that sense of jealousy that can turn into bitterness, and then the bitterness can be expressed in actions toward the wife. It can be expressed in his health, could be expressed in her health, and it's not good for anyone. Right. Now, on the other hand, if it is true, then this is a way to kind of skip hiring the private investigator, right? And you just take it straight to the priest, and that's that, right? So this is a way to really get to the bottom. And I think it would save a lot of time. It would, again, put this question to rest once and for all, right? Now, you might say, well, how did this work? Well, certainly we don't know ultimately, but what we do know is there's something called a placebo and a nocebo. Very interesting things, right? So there have been people who've taken a placebo. Placebo is when the patient thinks that they're taking a real active drug that's maybe supposed to help with their depression or with maybe some uh, health issue, and it's supposed to alleviate that, right? And then if they're given a placebo, they do that for medical test reasons. They want to see, is this thing really effective or is it just all in their head, right? So there was a story of a man who broke up with his girlfriend. He had been on antidepressant medication, and after they broke up, he decided to end it. That's it. I can't do this anymore, right? And so he overdoses on all of his medication. Well, not long after that, he's like, oh no, what have I done? I really didn't want to do that, but I did that in the spur of the moment. And then he rushes himself to the hospital. Now, by the time he gets there, he's already starting to show all the effects of the medication, right? He's starting to hyperventilate. His pulse is dropping. I mean, he's on the way out, right? Now, the ER contacts his doctor, and the doctor says, you know what? This guy is only on a placebo, right? He was one of the people that received a placebo instead of the real medication. And once the man learned this, he started to recover because he realized, oh, what I took, I thought was going to kill me, but in fact, it's just sugar or maybe salt, right? There's really nothing, there's no active ingredient that could actually do me any harm. And once he understood that, it changed the entire situation. But it shows you the power of the mind, right? His mind said, you took stuff that's going to kill you. And now guess what? Now you're dying, right? Just as expected. So it could be, now again, I don't know, maybe God did something special, right? That's God's domain. He can do that. However, once we understand that the placebo can be just a nothing pill or a nocebo, means that you actually start to feel the negative effects. And I should say also that the placebo, sometimes when you read the back of it and it says, people who take this may, should experience all these positive effects. Sometimes they actually do, just because their mind believes that they're going to, and then that's what actually happens. Same thing on the negative side. The nocebo is where they read all the possible side effects, and then they start to have those side effects. Okay. And this is real proven science, right? People were taking Rogaine, a Rogaine placebo, meaning they were taking it to regrow their hair, but all they were just taking was sugar or salt. They actually started to grow their hair. Why? Because the mind is very powerful, and that's how God created. So it could be that this is nothing more than a placebo or nocebo, in the sense that something bad was supposed to happen if she had done something wrong, right? This is kind of the ultimate lie detector. Okay. You can't really hide it because you believe it's going to be either bad situation if you actually did something, right? So that's the power of what's going on here. Okay, so we'll keep on moving. All right, so and the priest shall write these curses in a book, and he shall scrape them off into the bitter water. And he shall make the woman drink the bitter water that brings a curse, and the water that brings the curse shall enter her to become bitter. Then the priest shall take the grain offering of jealousy from the woman's hand, shall wave the offering before the Lord, and bring it to the altar. And the priest shall take a handful of the offering as its memorial portion, burn it on the altar, and afterward make the woman drink the water. When he has made her drink the water, then it shall be, if she has defiled herself and behaved unfaithfully toward her husband, that the water that brings a curse will enter her and become bitter, and her belly will swell, and her thigh will rot, and the woman become a curse among her people. But if the woman has not defiled herself and is clean, then she shall be free and may conceive children. This is the law of jealousy when a wife under her husband's authority goes astray and defiles herself, or when the spirit of jealousy comes upon a man and he becomes jealous of his wife, then he shall stand the woman before the Lord, and the priest shall execute all this law upon her. Then the man shall be free from iniquity, but that woman shall bear her guilt. All right, now I just want to point out that Psalm 119 did a whole teaching on this, and they were making the case that Jesus, in a sense, became the woman who drank the bitter water. Now, I found it provocative when I listened to it. They're suggesting that really his thigh was wasting away and his stomach became bloated, and that he was taking on the guilt of the adulterous wife. Okay, and so that he was taking that upon himself. I think they make a compelling case. I still have some reservations about their theory. Though it was compelling, but I still have some reservations whether or not that was actually experienced by Yeshua, whether Numbers chapter 5 was truly in view. It could be, but I'm not absolutely convinced. Okay, so I'm just throwing that out there. So if you guys want to go check out that teaching, you can decide for yourselves. Um, Again, I'm a little bit on the fence on that one, but I think they made a compelling case. So maybe you guys want to be the judge on that. All right, chapter 6. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, whether when either a man or a woman consecrates an offering to take the vow of a Nazarite, to separate himself to the Lord, he shall separate himself from wine and similar drink. He shall drink neither vinegar made from wine, nor vinegar made from similar drink, neither shall he drink any grape juice, nor eat fresh grapes or raisins. All the days of his separation he shall eat nothing that is produced by the grapevine, from seed to skin. All the days of the vow of his separation, no razor shall come upon his head until the days are fulfilled for which he separated himself to the Lord. He shall be holy. Then he shall let the locks of his hair, the hair of his head, grow. All the days that he separates himself to the Lord, he shall not go near a dead body. He shall not make himself unclean, even for his father or his mother, for his brother or his sister when they die, because his separation to God is on his head. All the days of his separation, he shall be holy to the Lord. And if anyone dies very suddenly beside him, and he defiles his consecrated head, then he shall shave his head on the day of his cleansing. On the 7th day he shall shave it. Then on the 8th day he shall bring 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons to the priest to the door of the tabernacle of meeting. All right, now let's back up a second, because if you're thinking what I'm thinking, who is the most famous or infamous person that was under a Nazarite vow? Well, if you guessed Samson, then you guessed right, because Samson was not supposed to drink any wine all the days of his life, as long as he had this vow. And guess what? He wasn't supposed to cut his hair, right? So those are the 2 things that he was not supposed to do. Now, Samson got himself in some trouble. He also went near dead bodies, right? So he wasn't exactly doing it up to snuff, but God, being patient and gracious, continued with Samson for a very long time. But there's a very sad part in the story. You guys have read it, I know, right? Is where Delilah, who he seems to know that she's there to try to get him to reveal what he's up to. And if he didn't figure that out, I guess he was kind of dense. I'm not really sure. But, she says, okay, tell me, if you love me, tell me what's the secret of your strength. And he says, well, if you tie me up with 7 new strands of flax, then I will be as weak as any man, right? And so she does it, lulls him to sleep. She does this, and then she says, Samson, the the Philistines are upon you, right? Well, he wakes up and he easily snaps those, right? And she's like, oh, don't you love me? And so then, okay, they do the next thing, right? And he gets out of that, no problem, right? And then she's like, oh, you're just teasing me and playing with me. If you really love me, tell me. So then in a moment of stupidity, he tells her, well, okay, if you cut my hair, then I'm done for, right? And so guess what? She cuts his hair, and they bind him. And then she says, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. And he wakes up and he thinks, I'm going to get out of there. It's just like any other time. And guess what? His strength is gone. And such a sad part in the Bible. Breaks my heart every time I read it. It says he did not realize that the Spirit of the Lord had departed from him. Oh, that's so sad, right? Because he sort of forgot, right, where his strength was coming from. He started to think it was only his own resource, and that he had this thing. Like, he kind of knew, but he's like, yeah, but this is kind of my thing, and I can sort of do what I want with it. And he absolutely squandered it, right? He did not take care of this precious gift that was given to him, right? So he's probably the most famous or infamous person who was ever under a Nazirite vow. But there's another person, another case study for us, which is where Paul, wanting to show that he was not against the Torah, let's take a look at that in Acts chapter 21, right? So Acts 21, here we go. So he comes to the city, comes to Jerusalem, and he tells them all the things that God had done. When they heard it, they glorified the Lord, and they said to him, you see, brother, there how many myriads of Jews there are who have believed, and they're all zealous for the law, for the Torah. But they've been informed about you, that you teach all the Jews who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, saying that they ought not to circumcise their children, nor to walk according to the customs. What then? The assembly must certainly meet, for they will hear that you have come. Therefore, do what we tell you. We have 4 men who have taken a vow, the Nazirite vow. Take them and be purified with them, and pay their expenses, so that they may shave their heads, and that all may know that those things of which they were informed concerning you are nothing, but that you yourself have also walked orderly and keep the law. All right. So these guys have already taken the Nazirite vow. They're now about to come off the Nazirite vow. And what we read in Numbers chapter 6 is that there is a process for coming off of that vow. And so Paul is going to pay their expenses. He's going to pay for the sacrificial animals, so they can do that. They're going to shave their hair, all this different stuff, right? And Paul clearly does that because he wants to show to everybody, to prove that he's not against the Torah. He's not against Moses, quote unquote, Moses being the Torah, but he wants to show I'm absolutely for the Torah. I'm not against it. Look, I'm going to do this thing, right? And so all of this is based on Numbers chapter 6. Now, you can run into people and they say, well, all of that was just a transitional period, right? And we didn't, none of that is applicable today. And, yeah, I mean, we're not doing Nazirite vows today, and we don't have a temple. So in that case, it was a transitional phase. But insofar as God's commandments the ones that still stand are the ones that we can still do, which is like most of them, except for anything specifically related to the temple. But otherwise, we can do these things, right? Now, I don't think we need to take a Nazirite vow, nor can we take a Nazirite vow, because we cannot go and offer the appropriate sacrifices to the Lord in the temple. It doesn't mean that, if you want to do it, I don't see any reason why you couldn't, right? It's just a matter of not cutting your hair for a time, not having any wine or any kind of grape product, right? You're not supposed to do that. And then at the end of that time, even though you cannot go and do sacrifices, you can then cut your hair and, so if that's something that you want to participate in, I believe you're welcome to do that. I mean, clearly Paul was doing it. Yes, there was a temple, but it was certainly under the auspices of the new covenant that this was happening. So I don't see the reason that you couldn't do it. But again, we don't have the temple. So that is a little bit of a monkey wrench. So anyway, so Paul was keeping and participating in the Nazirite vow, which we see there in the New Testament. Okay, so let's go back to Numbers chapter 6. Okay, so he says, all the days that he separates himself to the Lord, he shall come near a dead body, right, et cetera, et cetera. And then the 8th day, he shall bring 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons to the priest, to the door of the tabernacle of meeting, right? So Paul would have paid for these sacrifices. And the priest shall offer one as a sin offering and the other as a burnt offering, and make atonement for him, because he sinned in regard to the corpse, and he shall sanctify his head that same day. He shall consecrate to the Lord the days of his separation, and bring a male lamb in its first year as a trespass offering. But the former shall be lost, because his separation was defiled. Now, this is the law of the Nazirite. When the days of his separation are fulfilled, he shall be brought to the door of the tabernacle of meeting, and he shall present his offering to the Lord, 1 male lamb in its first year without blemish, as a burnt offering, 1 ewe lamb in its first year without blemish, as a sin offering, 1 ram without blemish, as a peace offering, a basket of unleavened bread, cakes of fine flour mixed with oil, unleavened wafers, anointed with oil, and their grain offering with their drink offerings. Then the priest shall bring them before the Lord and offer his sin offering and his burnt offering. And he shall offer the ram as a sacrifice of peace offering to the Lord with a basket of unleavened bread. The priest shall also offer its grain offering and its drink offering. Then the Nazarite shall shave his consecrated head at the door of the tabernacle of meeting, and shall take the hair from his consecrated head and put it on the fire, which is under the sacrifice of the peace offering. Right? So this all happened, and Paul was footing the bill for all these things that were happening. So he's, again, very much participating in this ritual to show that he was absolutely 100% for, he was pro Torah. Okay. So something to keep in mind. And the priest shall take the boiled shoulder of the ram, one unleavened cake from the basket, and one unleavened wafer, and put them upon the hands of the Nazarite after he has shaved his consecrated hair. And the priest shall wave them as a wave offering before the Lord. They are holy for the priest, together with the breast of the wave offering and the thigh of the heave offering. After that, the Nazarite may drink wine. So he's no longer a Nazarite after this point. Okay. So now it's interesting, Nazarite and Natsret, right? So there could be a connection there. Natseret is as like a branch, right? So that's where we get the word Nazareth from. It's talking about the branch. Okay. But then we have this word Notzri. So it could be that there's a correlation between that and Yeshua. All right. And of course, he's from Nazareth, right? So something to consider. This is the law of the Nazarites who vow to the Lord the offering for his separation. And besides that, whatever else his hand is able to provide, according to the vow which he takes, so he must do according to the law of his separation. All right, so all of that about this Nazarite vow, what you're supposed to do. Again, Paul was absolutely 100% for this. Samson should have been, but I don't think he was really up on this part of the Torah. I think he kind of forgot, perhaps. All right, then we come to this incredible blessing, and we say this every week at the Way congregation. It is such a powerful blessing. And understand that God wants to bless. Look at this. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to Aaron and his sons, saying, right? So God tells Moses, you tell Aaron that this is what they're supposed to say to the children of Israel, right? And there is a lot in this passage. All right, so we'll take the remainder of our time to take a look at this, right? So, Daber el Aaron ve'el banav le'mor kol tevarachu et bnei Israel amo lahem. Yevarechecha Adonai ve'yishmerecha ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chunecha yisa Adonai panav elecha ve'yasem lecha shalom. Right? So they shall put my name on the children of Israel, and I will bless them. Wow. Right? So the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Now, if you've watched some of my teachings at the Way congregation, you'll know that I put the word will in there. The Lord will bless you and keep you. Why do I do that? Well, because we have a couple options here when we're looking at the Hebrew. The way that it's translated in the New King James is legitimate, okay? But there's another way to translate it, which is a simple future tense, okay? So if we just look at this word right here, Yevarechecha Adonai ve'yishmerecha, right? The way that the translators are doing this is what we call a adjussive. May the Lord do this, right? In other words, it's kind of a, let God do this kind of thing. And you could also put another vernacular, oh, may the king do such and such. Right? The king isn't required to do that, but it's a plea. I hope that the king will do this, right? And again, that's a legitimate translation. But I would also suggest that there's another way to translate this, which is the Lord will bless you. That's called indicative. Indicative means that this is what is. Like, it will rain tomorrow versus, oh, may it rain tomorrow. One is I'm really giving an expression of hope. I hope it rains tomorrow. May it rain tomorrow versus it will rain tomorrow. One is absolute. And that is really what I see in this language here. It's not so much, I hope that he does. May he do it? but it's he will do it, right? The Lord will bless you and he will keep you. Now, again, it's a subtle difference. It's not, it's not a gigantic, a Grand Canyon, difference in theology. But I believe that it makes just a little bit of a difference, and it gives me some comfort to know that God will bless me, right? And I can walk around with confidence knowing that God will bless me, right? And I really, it just speaks to my heart in such a powerful way. Okay. And it's just so few words. We have such an incredible blessing. And I always encourage people, meditate on these words, because this is what God wants you to know, that he will bless you, right? He's said so many times, I want to bless you. And if you follow my ways, I will bless you. I will, and I'll keep you. And I'm going to make my face shine upon you, and I'm going to be gracious to you. And I will lift up my countenance upon you, and I will give you peace if you follow my ways, right? That is what God is saying, right? We see this in so many passages, right? Leviticus 26, right? If you do what I say, here's the blessings that will come. If you don't, here's the other stuff, right? Deuteronomy 28, same basic scenario, because God wants to bless, right? So the promise here is that he will bless you, right? That means that, in fact, it even says that God will cause, he will command his blessing to go upon you, right? He's going to command his blessing to be upon you if you do what he says. And that is an awesome thing. That means instead of negative things, good things are coming your way. Jesus said it this way, which of you, if he has a son and his son asks for bread, would give him a stone, or if he asks for a fish, would give him a scorpion. And so if you, being evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more does your Father in heaven give good things to those who ask of him, right? God desires to give us good things. Now, sometimes in our Christian walk, we get this sense of, well, I'm supposed to be a martyr and I'm supposed to, suffer in life. And look, I'm not saying that those things won't happen. They certainly can, right? And if they happen, then we'll embrace them. If suffering comes for the name of Christ, then I will embrace it, right? So it doesn't mean it's all going to be roses. I'm not preaching that. However, there's this flip side, right, that we see throughout the Hebrew scriptures, that if you do what God says, then good times will follow. Like, that's the basic scenario. Do what he says, good times follow. Don't do what he says, curses follow, right? It's really that simple. You can put this in kind of a modern vernacular. What happens if you break the law? Do good times follow? I don't think so. You might get away with something for a time, right? But now with all of the DNA kinds of stuff, I mean, people that killed people years ago are now being discovered, right? Because DNA is revealing, right? So all those years they lived with that guilt, they lived with the fear that they'd be discovered, and sure enough, now they are, and guess what? They're going to jail for the rest of their lives. People that commit fraud and other kinds of financial crimes, guess what? They're going to jail as well, right? Because eventually what you're getting away with will eventually come to light, and that's that, right? So you're not blessed by cheating, by killing, by stealing. You're not blessed at all. You're cursed. And that's just a natural consequence of those choices. But if you follow what God has said, right? So it says in Psalms that the righteous is bold, right? He doesn't have anything to fear because he knows that he's doing the right thing. And so he's not afraid of bad things happening to him because he's doing the right thing, right? So the Lord will bless you. He will keep you. And then this is beautiful. The Lord will make his face shine upon you, right? So when God's face is upon you, that's a good thing. What do we see in scripture? What God says that he's going to do to those who continually don't follow him. He says he's going to turn his face away. Right? He turned his face away from the house of Israel for a spell. He turned his face away from Judah. And guess who else he turned his face away from? Yeshua, right? When he was on the cross, the Father turned his face away, right? And that's when Yeshua cried out Eli, Eli, lama shvaktani, right? My God, why have you forsaken me? When God isn't willing to look at you, his face is turned away, that means God has deserted you. And that is a scary place to be. Because if God deserts you, yeah, yeah, that's not a good place to be. And that's what we see in Romans chapter 1, is that God gave them over to their debased mind and to their depravities because they kept going after it. So he gave them to it, said, okay, go for it. And he turned his face away, as it were, right? And we see in Ezekiel, let's take a look at that. Ezekiel 39, where God is going to once again turn his face toward Israel. Okay. And so this is in verse. All right, here we go. Verse 29. And I will not hide my face from them anymore, for I shall have poured out my spirit on the house of Israel, says the Lord God. So this is speaking specifically of the house of Israel versus the house of Judah in this passage, that God had hidden his face from the house of Israel. And how did that turn out for them? It didn't turn out very well. God said, you're no longer my people. I'm not your God, right? It's over between us. You're now free to go among the Gentiles because my face isn't there, right? And so he's going to bring the house of Israel back. And once again, he's going to turn his face toward them. That will be a very, very beautiful time. Now, we also have this wonderful thing where it says here in Zechariah, I will pour on the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and supplication, and they will look on me whom they pierced. Yes, they will mourn for him as one mourns for his only son, and grieve for him as one grieves for his firstborn. Right? So they're going to look to him, right? They're going to look to God's face. Now, this is, I would argue, speaking about the leadership of Jerusalem, right? That's a whole different study. But God is also going to turn his face toward them in a very favorable way in the days to come. All right, so let's get back to our text. We're almost done with it, right? So he's going to lift up his countenance. Countenance, of course, is the face, and he'll give you peace, right? Well, let me go back here. The Lord will make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. So if his face is toward you, he's showing his grace and his mercy and his goodness and all of those wonderful things that we see where in Exodus chapter 34, right? That God is gracious and long-suffering and abounding with goodness in truth, right? That's what we want, is a God who is compassionate toward us. And this is the promise that God gives us. And to go along with that, he says, the Lord will lift up his countenance, right? So his face is going to look at you, and guess what? He'll give you peace. You know, at the end of the day, after it's all said and done, there's only two things that we desire in life. There's only two if you boil it down. One is peace, to not be in a frenzy and to be anxious and all these different things that can come with not having peace. And the other one is, guess what? Joy, right? So once you have a baseline of peace, right? Nobody's trying to kill you, right? No one's trying to steal from you. You have security in your life. You're not worried about your next meal. That's peace. And then to build on top of that is what? Joy, right? God gives us joy, right? So these are the two things, right? So when his face is upon me, then guess what? I'm going to have peace, and joy will follow thereafter. And it says, so they shall put my name on the children of Israel, and I will bless them. Now, we don't usually say that as part of the blessing because this is God's commentary, but it's really a significant part of it, right? God says, I'm going to put my name on them. That's a massive stamp of approval, right? When God puts his name on what you're doing, wow, that's pretty awesome, right? Because how much is a good reputation? How much is a good name worth? More than its weight in gold. How much is God's good reputation worth? A lot, more than we can even fathom. And so if he's willing to put his reputation on you, he's sort of putting his bumper sticker on the back of you, as it were, right? That's a big deal, right? And this is why we want to walk circumspectly in our faith walk, right? We want to do what God tells us to do because blessings will follow. And if we don't, then, well, you know the flip side, sadly, blessings will not follow. And again, I just go back to the whole thing about abominations. We are so quick to throw stones at other people's sins, and those 7 that are an abomination in God's sight, right? A proud look. That's number one, right? We're so quick to forget about those things. If you remember, can't remember where it is, it's in Proverbs chapter 6, starting at verse 16. Review that list frequently, because I think it will cause a lot of us to maybe walk with a bit more humility. And you can't go wrong if you walk with more humility. Don't be proud. Don't be haughty, right? Don't have feet that are swift and running to evil. Don't be a false witness who tells a lie about your neighbor, right? Don't be the one who's sowing discord among the brethren. And you may say, well, I'm not doing that, right? I don't go among the brethren and do that. Yeah, but you might do it on Facebook, right? Or Twitter, or whatever your social media is. You might be saying things or forwarding memes that you have not verified, but you think it's true because so-and-so, who was a good Christian, he just forwarded it to you, or she did. And so therefore it must be true, right? We can all fall into that trap. I've fallen into that as well, right? And this is where we need to really consider our own actions and say, Father, am I doing what you would have me do? Because I tend to look at these other sins that are a bit more obvious and say, wow, I'm not doing those. But then these other ones, I'm really slow to think about my own shortfalls, right? So this is where we really got to be careful. But if we'll do it, then good things will come. I'm into that. All right, let me just check really quick, guys. I want to see if there are some questions that maybe I can answer, or just some great comments. All right. Let's see. All right, a little bit of commentary going on. Very cool. And just want to see if there's anything specifically for me. Looks like here's a comment. But Doug, it's so much easier just to do what I want. No one really says that, but that's what they are saying in my experience. I agree with you. And I would include myself in that. So I don't claim to have arrived by any means. So very cool. Very good, guys. Well, I'm so glad. Oh, here we go. Here's the last one. How much does good character weigh? Yeah, a lot. Right? It's hard to put a number on it, but it weighs a lot. And it's worth so much. Right? And so we want to have good character. And no one's going to make us do it. Right? That's something that we have to decide to do. All of the things we've been talking about is really having good character. Right? We want to be like God. And we want to have a good character like God. So we need to follow his commandments. So very cool. Awesome. Well, thank you, guys. Any other questions? I encourage you to bring those on Tuesdays when I will talk about every other topic in the Bible. Okay, so you can bring those on Tuesdays right here on this channel at 5 o'clock Mountain Time when I just take your Bible questions. So I look forward to getting to those. All right. Until next time.